Sophisticated and new, that's how police are describing a phone scam that defrauded 5 people here in Toronto out of more than $5 million. So how does it happen? Well, first, a call comes into the landline, and the person on that end says that your credit card is currently involved in a fraud at their retail store. They advise you to hang up immediately, call police or your financial institution, and you do just that. You offer up some of your most vulnerable information. That person also advises you to transfer all your funds out of your account and into an external account as an investigation is started. But there is no investigation. The people you've been speaking with, well, they're not who you think they are. You've actually been chatting with fraudsters this whole time. And even though you think you hung up that phone call, the call was never really disconnected.
There is an effort to convince the victim of the need for secrecy. They're persuaded that there is an ongoing bank investigation involving perhaps a complicit employee, and this is again a fabrication. And they will keep the victims, the calls ongoing for several days. And I believe the reason for doing so is to ensure that no efforts are made to recover the money whilst it's being withdrawn from wherever it's been sent to. Typically, when wire transfers are made, it's difficult to move that money along.
Not only by Toronto police, but also the RCMP and U.S. officials. They've been happening for at least 4 months. Police say anyone can be targeted, and there's evidence hundreds of thousands of attempts have been made Canada-wide. A cybersecurity expert says the vulnerability may not be the landline itself, but something else that's common in many Canadian households.
The major vulnerability here is really relying on potential vulnerabilities in VoIP, voice over IP phones, that exist in a lot of residences today. There's been a lot of documented mechanisms on exposing vulnerabilities in VoIP systems. It's been publicly available. We've seen it in the wild, both on a personal level and commercial level. There's just a lot of ways to compromise VoIP systems. With landlines, it's a little bit more difficult and really goes what I call to the old-fashioned ways of intelligence gathering.
And during that presser, police also offered up some tips on how people can protect themselves against scam like this. The first is they're reminding residents that 911 is simply for emergencies that put either people or properties at risk, and an operator would never transfer you over to an investigator. Now, if you are worried about the security of your funds, police advise you to walk into your bank branch and deal with these concerns in person and not over the phone. And now also take extra steps in ensuring the claims are true. Just because a caller ID number shows up on your phone doesn't mean that that you know who you're speaking with. In fact, there are many technologies, spoofing technologies, that are used and provide inaccurate caller ID information. And if you doubt the person who you're speaking with isn't who they say they are, well, simply take their information down, hang up that call, do some research, and if you do decide to call them back, simply do that on another landline. Now, as we said, this is a completely sophisticated and new scheme ahead. I'll tell you who the cybersecurity thinks is behind this scheme.
The scheme appears to be directed at persons using their home-based phones. There's no particular phone provider involved. To date, 5 Toronto victims have suffered losses of over 5.1 million Canadian.
We've been telling you about a new and sophisticated phone scam that dupes victims into thinking they're speaking with 911 operators or their financial institutions, when in reality they're just giving all their private and vulnerable information to fraudsters. Now, a cybersecurity expert we spoke with today says this type of scheme can only be the work of a serious crime ring.
This sounds like something extremely sophisticated. I would say that probably in the rounds of top criminals, this has been a fantasy for a very long time. When you have this type of a mechanism being executed, it really falls into 2 categories. Category number 1 is this is a state-sponsored type of attack where you have a government body standing behind you because you need to be very well funded and lots of technical support to be able to perform something of this nature. On the other side, it could be a very large organized crime ring that is able to pull this off, as this type of a mechanism you cannot pull off out of a basement.
And police say they're trying to raise awareness on this scam. Some tips that they have offered to help residents protect themselves is first, they're reminding residents that 911 is strictly for emergencies that have to do with people or properties being put at risk. They also say a 911 operator will never transfer you over to an investigator. Now, if you are worried about the security of your funds in any way, police are advising residents to walk into a branch and deal with the matter face to face rather than dealing with it over the phone. Take extra steps when it comes to you believing who you speak with. Don't assume that just because a number shows up on your caller ID that it's official. There are many spoofing technologies that don't really provide enough information on this caller ID. Now, if you doubt the person who's calling you is who they say they are, they say take all their information down, do some research, and then at a later date, call them back if you do wish to do so.